Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to March and Silva MMA show. And we've got a good one. We've got a special one this week. We're talking about UFC 309 that happened last weekend. And we've got UFC Macau, I do believe that's how you pronounce it. But we've got that this weekend. Some fantastic fights. But firstly, Oscar, I'm throwing over to you. How are you in America?
It feels good to be back on this podcast, live on YouTube or on X. And there's just a lot of energy surrounding this main event between Davison Figueiredo and Petr Yan. A little bit also left over from Jon Jones defeating Stipe Miocic in Madison Square Garden with the first ever spinning back kick finish in UFC title fight history. So there's a lot to cover here. I'm very excited to do it. And the energy really is up, especially, I'm sure, for the international fans that do not have to watch at an unreasonable time like we do for the UFC Macau card. It's going to start at midnight for us, the prelims. So unless you're pulling an all-nighter, you're not going to be seeing this live. I'm going to admit I'm not pulling an all-nighter. I'm going to watch it as soon as I get up. But for the real fans out there, now's your time to watch it at a reasonable time.
Yeah, welcome to our world. The Americans finally get a taste of what we get to do every week. Sometimes you love it, sometimes you don't, especially if it's a Rose Namajunas / Carla Esparza main event. You absolutely hate it. So I'm hoping for some good fights just to keep you awake. That's what really keeps you going. And you'll find out the hardship of all the Europeans have to do every week to watch these fights. But as you mentioned, let's talk about UFC 309. Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. This fight week was, it felt good. There was two legends going at it. Jon Jones, one of the greatest of all time. Stipe Miocic, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time that the UFC has ever seen. Defended the belt the most times ever in the UFC heavyweight division. This one for me was very bitter, very sad. I love Stipe Miocic. For this fight, I got out my Reebok UFC fight wear walkout tee for when he fought DC for the third time, I do believe. This guy, one of my favorite fighters ever. I loved him. I just this fight, it was kind of sad. It was quite emotional because I was watching Stipe Miocic just be a shadow of himself. He looked terrible in there. I think that's the best way to put it. He looked terrible, slow, sluggish. Didn't really land anything significant on Jon Jones. Jon Jones was kind of sort of toying with him, playing with him, landing it at will. A very, very tough watch for me. Being a Stipe Miocic fan, to see what he has done in the heavyweight division over the years, I just feel that 3-year break and that knockout loss to Francis Ngannou was massive. It was big, and it paid a lot of negative downfall into his performance. And, the break would have done no help. But a tough watch. I'm happy to see the end of Stipe Miocic's career because I just don't think it would have went well for him if he carried on fighting. 42 years old. This one, it was a bad performance for Stipe.
The critics of this fight were validated with Stipe's performance because Stipe, as you said, kind of looked like a shell of himself. He was slower out there. He was getting hurt by things that would never hurt him before. He got taken out very easily, just was stuck on bottom. It was tough scenes out there for the 42-year-old Stipe Miocic. And before the fight, he made it clear that this probably would be his last fight. And he got, he got that confirmed when he got TKO'd in round 4 with that spinning body kick by Jon Jones. The impressive nature of that lies in the fact that Jon Jones has all this additional weight on him, and he still has the confidence to jump and land that kick with perfection. So Stipe retires after the fight, rightfully so. I feel like if he goes in there with some of these younger, more powerful heavyweights than Jon, he might get put to sleep, but even earlier, especially against Tom Aspinall. So for Stipe, it's the right move. He already has employment outside of this. And I feel like a lot of people are not celebrating his career enough just because we felt like this finish was inevitable. But there's so much to celebrate here. This guy has done it all in the UFC heavyweight division, including having the most title defense of all time. He's beaten several champions. And this is the man that I feel should be celebrated more.
Absolutely agree. Good to see Stipe just kind of ride off into the sunset. Nothing left to prove for Stipe, one of the most decorated heavyweights of all time, especially inside the UFC, defending his belt 3 times. If you look at the names he fought as well, Daniel Cormier, Francis Ngannou twice. He went in out there for Fabricio Werdum. He fought some real savages, and I think the legacy and the history that he's left behind is, he'll be proud of that, and he'll ride off into the sunset, ride off into the fire. The fire, I don't even know what you call it, the fire station, and continue his life at will. Great fight. Thoughts on Jon Jones, though? I feel like there was a lot of mixed feelings of how he looked as well. Was you impressed? Because I have my feelings of how he looked as well. I think it was a bad performance from Stipe, but I also have a mixed feeling about how Jon Jones looked as well.
Yeah, what can't be said about Jon Jones at this point? Everybody has come for him on Twitter, including myself, and he felt compelled enough to respond to me. I asked him, would a win over Tom Aspinall, would it silence the doubters? And he went on to say that he's going to have doubters anyway because a lot of us are new fans. He had a reputation for silencing doubters before I even had the phone, which is correct, but I'm not a new fan. That's just not true. He's trying to make up these narratives to just dispel any notion that Tom Aspinall can beat him, which I think is ridiculous. Tom is the most dangerous man you can put in the octagon with him. Of any division, of any sport, he's the most dangerous man you could put in there with Jon Jones. And Jon Jones is trying to have these fun fights against Derek Lewis, Jamal Hill, Alex Pereira. These are fights that he will win and he will get paid a lot for, but there's a real possibility where Tom Aspinall is the biggest fight, even bigger than Alex Pereira, because of the fact that people really believe that Tom has the best shot. So people will pay to see a moment like that. So that is the fight to make. Everybody knows it except Jon. And for Tom Aspinall, he has nothing to be ashamed of. Just hang tight and he'll be undisputed champion before you know it.
Absolutely agree. I'm looking forward to see how it all plays out. Well, the Tom Jones and Jon Jones, situation, how it all plays out. It seems like there's positive talks with the UFC and Tom Aspinall, but the UFC have got to talk with Jon Jones, and that's where I think it's all going to go a little bit wrong. We know how he's been in the past with, with conversations and stuff like that, and I feel like there might be a little bit of a spark with the UFC and Jon Jones later down the line, but we should see how that all plays out. Great main event, enjoyed it. But let's talk about that co-main event. Absolutely fantastic. Even better. Fight, 5 rounds. Heading into this one, I was 5 rounds, and I thought, maybe do I want to see 5 rounds? Yes, absolutely. I did want to see 5 rounds after the fight. I was so pleased that we saw a 5th round because Michael Chandler put his heart out there, put everything is so out there in that 5th round, and almost had Du Bronx out of there. It was close for a minute, Oscar, wasn't it? With the back of the headshots as well, by the way.
Yeah, Michael Chandler was cheating left and right in this fight. He was hitting Charles in the back of the head. He was grabbing the fence. This was a Michael Chandler that was quite desperate for a win at times. Charles Oliveira fought very different than he usually does. And the fact that he did not throw caution to the wind too often in here. Sure, he was swinging some big hooks on the feet, but he decided to get takedowns. He got them. And on the ground, he wasn't jumping on submissions quickly. He wasn't posturing up and landing tons of ground and pound. He was just happy to maintain position. It almost was Hoist Gracie-esque in the fact that he just decided to maintain position for significant periods of time. This was a dominant performance from Charles Oliveira until it wasn't. Round 5, Charles Oliveira has had 4 consecutive rounds where he has had a lot of control time. It's a foregone conclusion that he's going to win this thing. And then Michael Chandler just charges forward, drops Charles on the feet. He tries to drop him again. He swings so hard, he knocks himself over and allows Charles to take his back. And then you have Michael Chandler thinking he's in a movie or something where he has that dramatic stand up while Charles is on his back. And then I kept on screaming that Michael is going to jump because that's what he did last time they fought. He had Charles on his back in round 1 and he jumped. And he didn't jump once this time. He jumped twice. I felt like he was just there to entertain the fans, and that's what he did. Mission accomplished, and that gave him so much confidence. He proceeded to call out Conor McGregor.
Yeah, the call out of Conor McGregor, the call out felt like he won. That's the sort of call out fighters make if they win a fight. Unfortunately, he did lose. He didn't get on the right side. Fantastic performance from Charles Oliveira do Bronx. 4-1 round, 4 rounds to 1. It was great. Good to see do Bronx back in the winning column. Needed it. Must win to get himself back into that title picture. And it maybe looks like Islam tweeted it. Islam tweeted it during the fight. He says whoever wins this fight is possible. It looks like next on the title. So whoever wins that of Arman Tazarian and Islam Makhachev maybe be standing next to Charles Oliveira next. Next one we had Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig. A lot of people were saying Bo Nickel, it was a bad performance, against Paul Craig, who didn't look too great either. But I felt like this was a good fight for Bo Nickel because we saw 15 minutes of work. We saw a little bit of versatility, especially the striking. Did the striking look fantastic, world class, elite? Absolutely not. He's fighting Paul Craig, who yet again kind of a bit of a grappler, really hardcore grappling, striking not very great. We saw improvements of Paul Craig's grappling as well, but Bo Nickel, I just felt like it was just 15 minutes of work, and that's what we've really got to take away from this. A lot of people are saying the potential is still not there, or might not ever be there. I still think he could go on to be top 5 in the world, top 5 if not champion. I think this is just a road that he needs to get across. I think 15 minutes of hard work against Paul Craig, who's been up the top, beat Magomed Ankalaev, beat Jamal Hill. If there is a guy that you slip to, it is the Scottish man of Paul Craig. He beat some of the best in the world champions. And Bo Nickel, I felt like handled it with ease. Might not have been the best fight, might have been the most entertaining fight. But for the most important thing for Bo Nickel, it was 15 minutes of work inside the UFC Octagon cage.
Yeah, this for me was a fight that showed how high the expectations were for Bo Nickel. Everybody thought this guy was ready for the top 5 of the division even. But this brought us back down to reality. And I feel like this is comparable to the Khamzat Chimaev Gilbert Burns fight, where it's a fight where we found out that the guy was human. The guy lost a round at least. And for Bo Nickel, sure, he was challenged in this fight. But why would you dismiss the fact that he can improve? This guy can improve. He's just started. You give this guy 5 years, he's going to be in that title picture. No doubt about it. But from an entertainment standpoint, from a risk-taking standpoint, this was a bad performance from Bo Nickel. But if you're his coach, you're like, this guy just went out there, shows he had the cardio to strike for 15 minutes. So that at least is a stepping stone for Bo Nickel to be able to show that he can simply win with striking against some of these lower level guys, which I hate to call Paul Craig that because he has quality wins, but at this point in his career, he's definitely on the decline, and it really showed here. Also, the way I compared to Chimaev versus Burns is the fact that Bo Nickel did not take down Craig because Craig is so dangerous with the jiu-jitsu. That's why Khamzat didn't take down Gilbert Burns, because the jiu-jitsu is so dangerous. So if you're left with only one of your skill sets and it's not the strongest, you're not going to look like the future champion that you are.
Yeah, a great fight for Bo Nickel. 15 minutes of work, as I mentioned, and I think that's just going to be the most important thing for him moving forward. Just more octagon time is what he needed. And against, as I talked about, Paul Craig, who's beat some champions, and Magomed Ankalaev, beat Jamal Hill, submitted them both. Obviously, as we talked about, Bo Nickel didn't grapple, so we didn't find out what could have happened there. But at the end of the day, he got the win. People were charting overrated, or in the crowd, and I felt like there's a lot of positives to take away from that. Also, Bo Nickel could have completely lost his head, switched off, but he didn't. He stayed focused on the main goal, and he got the job done. Do I think it was a good performance? No. Do I think he just got 15 minutes of work and got the job done? Yes. We'll see what happens moving forward. I think he'll only improve from this, and it'll make him more a better fighter and a better person. So next one, we have Viviane Araújo versus Karine Silva. This one, Oscar, I'm throwing straight over to you. Viviane Araújo, it's a battle between Brazilian versus Brazilian. We talk about these guys and these women's that you have to get past to reach the top of the division. Araújo is one of them. And unfortunately, Silva did fall to the hands of her. Talk to me about this fight. Arujo getting the win.
I thought Karina Silva won this fight. I felt that round one was a guaranteed round for her. She hurt Viviani on the feet in round two. She landed more significant strikes than Araujo. So I felt that she won round two. And in round three, that was a horrific round from every standpoint. The technique was bad, the fight IQ was bad, and the cardio was just unbelievable. And just how much it was lacking there. And I hate to criticize Karina Silva. I announce her fights and all this stuff, but she obviously has some improvements that need to be made before she can compete in the top 10 of this division. Uh, if you can't finish people like she did early on in her UFC run, she's going to struggle against these women that can fight 3 rounds comfortably. And imagine a 5-round fight. It's probably going to end up with her getting finished. So I'm glad she didn't take that Rose Namajunas 5-round fight that she was in contention for earlier in the year. But Viviane Araujo showed that she can tough herself out of a tough spot. So good on her. She's now established herself as a reliable gatekeeper. But Karina Silva, I feel, is the main takeaway here because I do think she has a lot more potential than she showed.
Yeah, and the first one of the main card we saw Marisha Ruffy. This was a fantastic fight from start to finish. Ruffy's an awkward one. He's he throws with every single limb. He'll throw with his arm, his elbow, his tricep, his bicep. He'll throw with anything that he can if it lands. Talk to me about Marisha Ruffy. He got the job done. A fantastic fight to watch as a fan. It was a great spectacle.
Yeah, this was the fight where Hoofy was a 9-1 favorite, but he did not look like it for periods of this fight because Hamas on top is incredibly tough. What he did out there, he showed that he should not be that big of an underdog. He was able to hurt Rufi. He for sure won round 3 with the fact that Rufi had tired. And on top, there's a lot to respect with this guy. But it's clear that Rufi was the more skillful striker out there. Obviously has an inspiration from Conor McGregor, was catching him left and right, but Hamas on top has a chin of steel.
Absolutely agree. And that was the last one on the main card. And what we're going to do is we're going to quickly catch the prelims. Obviously, there was a few standout performances. Obviously, Jim Miller went in there, did what he done. The Marcin Tybura fight was great. Ramos Mahimite absolutely starching Mickey Gall. And obviously, the man, the Welshman, the Welsh gangster, Oban Elliott, absolutely starching the lights out of Basil Hafez. A few standout performances, but for me, Oban, Marcin Tybura, and Jim Miller was fantastic. Was a great watch, especially Jim Miller. Doing it at his age is fantastic to see. Oscar, what was your main takeaways on the prelims? Who stood out most?
Yeah, we had some really great finishes. Obviously, Oban Elliott to do that to Basil Hafez, who went 15 minutes with Jack Della Maddalena in his debut, ate everything. So for Oban Elliott, who's kind of more of a grappler in a sense, to knock him out that easily, that shows major improvements, and this guy's going to be a problem. Probably going to be in the rankings in a couple of years. Ramis Brahimaj got his first KO of his career. Has never knocked anybody out. But guess what? UFC, they know what's up. They brought back the old gloves. Those new gloves were no good. They were pillow hands, and now we have these real gloves where guys are getting murdered left and right. Mickey Gall, of course, was a victim. Marcin Tybura, he should have been a humongous favorite in this fight. I don't know why he wasn't. Because when he fought Jonathan Diniz, a glory kickboxer, I knew Tybura was going to do this to him. I said second round knockout. And it almost got to a third round, but it should have been stopped at the end of round 2. And thankfully it was. And for Onama versus Roberto Romero, this was a crazy fight. You could have given this fight of the night if you wanted to. Because Romero was this huge underdog, short notice. Nobody gave him a shot. This was almost a 50-50 fight. He was able to hurt Onama bad early on, but he did gas out later on. And Onama was able to win a unanimous decision. But you have to look out for Roberto Romero. This guy is legit.
Yeah, he came in at short notice as well. Obviously, didn't have a full camp, didn't have to prepare for Onama. Accepted the fight on short notice. Obviously, Onama, he was scheduled to fight Lucas Almeida, but unfortunately fell through. Roberto Romero might have the prettiest record, but I think what we know from him, he's an absolute gamer. He might take one to give one. He's a little scrapper, and he's Mexican. Is that so? That probably you can understand that. The Mexicans, they love to fight, they love to bleed, they love to take one to give one. And I feel like he sums up pretty much. It was a great fight to watch. And as your thoughts about, yes, let's definitely watch out for him and see where he goes for the future. That was 309. That was the prelims. Overall card. What was your assessment? I felt like it was the main card was the last two fights were great. I feel like the prelims delivered as well. There was just a few fights in there that I felt like were a stalemate a little bit. But overall assessment on the card.
Yeah, this was a good card. I wouldn't say it was a great card. You had some great moments, but there was, as you said, some moments on this card where you kind of wanted to fast forward to the next fight.
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. Next one, we do have UFC Macau this weekend in China. And this is one of the best main events, as for a fight night that I feel like the UFC could have delivered. Peter Yan versus Davison Figueiredo. Great main event in the bantamweight division. Peter Yan, former champion at bantamweight. Davison Figueiredo, former champion at flyweight. Two champions will eventually meet. Davison Figueiredo, obviously, he's coming into the, he's fresh in this the bantamweight division. He's undefeated in this bantamweight division. Obviously, off a win over Cody Garbrandt. Off a win against Marlon Vera. He takes on Peter Yan. And I've seen some pictures of Peter Yan this week at the UFC photos. When they do the UFC photos at the fight week. Yeah. He looks massive. He looks quite big. He looks like he might have bulked up a little bit, added a little bit more muscle. But we'll see if that plays a factor this weekend. But firstly, Oscar, main event, Peter Yan, Davison Figueiredo, two former champions going at it in the bantamweight division. Who have we got?
I've got Petr Yan. He's the favorite for a reason. This guy was the champion in this division once upon a time. Davison is a guy that's moving up a weight class. And with moving up a weight class, he doesn't have to make that tough weight cut, but he's also compromising a little bit of his physicality. When he fought at flyweight, nobody knocked down guys more than Davison. He was knocking down guys left and right, even the current champion Pantoja. He dropped them like 2 times. But at 135, sure, he is hurting guys here and there, especially Marlon Cheetah Bear. He became the first man to drop him in the UFC in his last fight, but he's still not knocking guys out. He's not really finishing guys like he did early on at flyweight. He got the decision win over Rob Font using some wrestling. He got the submission over Cody Garbrandt with the jiu-jitsu, and then his last fight was against Marlon Vera, which he mostly won with wrestling as well. So he's using wrestling more than ever, but Petr Yan has really worked a lot on his wrestling defense in these last couple of fights. After he lost the title to Aljamain Sterling with the wrestling, he still showed that he can defend the wrestling later on in that fight. And Song Yadong tried to wrestle him, failed to do so. So it's going to be a lot of striking in this fight, if you ask me. And Petr Yan has a style that is perfect for 5 rounds because he's willing to sacrifice the first couple of rounds to make himself look good later on as he make those reads. And Davison Figueiredo is just going to be overwhelmed with the damage that Petr Yan inflicts on him. I think the body shots will matter a lot from Petr Yan. If you see his fight with Jose Aldo, he was able to systematically break him down. And that was a guy that used to be featherweight champion. So I think Petr Yan gets a big finish here. I'm going to say it comes in round 4 with a TKO with ground and pound, similar to what he did with Jose Aldo. Petr Yan is actually half Chinese. A lot of people don't know that his father was Chinese. So the crowd is on his side. He has the same last name as Yan Xiaonan's family name as well, which means beautiful. And this is going to be a beautiful performance by Petr Yan in front of the Chinese crowd in Macau.
I never knew that, Oscar. You learn new things every day. So yes, there will be a side of his fans this weekend. That is interesting. Good to know that as well. Let's see how that sort of fighting home away from home. Maybe seeing some old relatives, seeing some old family out there in China. Good fight this weekend. We do have Petr Yan and Davison Figueiredo. I'm also on the side of Petr Yan. I feel like this is a fantastic fight. I feel like the only style that troubles Yan is pure grapplers that we've seen in the past. Obviously, Marv Devashvili I know Sean O'Malley beat him, but that was that was a close one. That could have went his way, arguably, that day. But if you look at his losses in the past, Aljamain Sterling, a pure grappler. And obviously we had Marv Davishvili, just taking him down at will. But they came back with a win against Yadong Song. This one for me, I feel like is a great matchup for PTM. But everything you were just saying there would pretty much adds up. Davison Figueiredo as well. He's very counter striking based. He's always looking to kind of strike when you strike, and try and catch you when you're going back. For me, Petr Yan has some of the best boxing in the bantamweight division. If he gets flowing, and get the rhythm going, I feel like he's a really, really good fighter, and it'll be hard for Davison Figueiredo to kind of stop their momentum. This one for me as well, I do predict a late stoppage, 4th, 5th round. TKO would be a good shout, but I'm expecting maybe the Davison Figueiredo just kind of not wilt, but just say, this is enough. I feel like we're going to see eventually PTN knock out Davison Figueiredo.
Yeah, Davison, I think, will for sure put up a fight. This is going to be the fight of the night. Both guys have a lot of power. They're willing to exchange in the pocket, so it's going to be entertaining the whole way through. But I believe Petr Yan is the superior mixed martial artist, especially at this age. Davison is north of 35 at this point, so the decline is bound to come. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. And the next fight is a quality co-main event at strawweight. Another Yan, but this time it's Yan Xiaonan, who's fighting out of China. And Tabitha Ricci has looked better than ever recently. And a lot of this is thanks to her boyfriend, Callum Walsh, UFC's favorite boxer out of Ireland, who helps her with her boxing. And she keeps on leveling that up. So we're going to see if it's good enough to take on the former title challenger, Yan Xiaonan. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, this is a great matchup, and that's an interesting point that you made there with obviously Tabitha Ricci's I was about to say boyfriend being Callum Walsh, obviously Irish boxer, promoted heavily by the UFC and the UFC Fight Pass. Interesting to see, as you mentioned, great boxer, 12-0, undefeated, a great boyfriend to have if you wanted to improve your boxing. Let's see how it plays out this weekend against Yao Shannan. But unfortunately, I do believe Yao Shannan will win this fight. If you look at the fight against Wei Li, I feel like she lost that fight, but I feel like I was impressed. I feel like she showed a lot in that fight. Took Wei Li, not all the way, but was in the majority of that fight. Her striking, she's powerful. If she can land, she can knock you out, as we've seen against Jessica Andrade. She's beat some really good girls like Mackenzie Dern. And this one I feel like quite similar as well. Riki, more dominant on the ground, wants to get a fight to the ground of this. Quite a similar fight against Mackenzie Dern. I think Yao Xiaonan will win this fight. I think she could stop the grappling prowess of Riki and land at will on the feet. As I talked about, she's got some power. I don't think there will be a knockout or a finish in this one because I never really predict a finish in the women's fights. But I see this one going to scorecards, and I think Yao Xiaonan will win this one.
Yeah, Yan Xiaonan showed her toughness once he fought Zhang Weili. She got choked to sleep in round 1 of that fight. And then her corner was able to wake her up. And after she woke up, she brought a lot of adversity to Zhang Weili. She was able to drop her and really having a lot of stock in Zhang Weili. I was very nervous for her because Yan Xiaonan was looking very dangerous even after getting choked out. So Tabitha Ricci, she does have an advantage with the grappling here. She could implement some of that, but she does not submit a ton of people. If you see these fights that she's had, she usually uses it more so for control. So I think the damage is going to be coming from Yan Xiaonan here. Even if Ricci were to land more, it would not matter because Yan Xiaonan is going to be landing the harder shots. She could even drop Ricci. Ricci, of course, did get knocked out by Manon Fiorot in her debut. So I think Yan does more damage, wins the decision.
Yeah, completely agree. Looking forward to that one. The next one, at 170 pounds at welterweight, we've got another Chinese competitor in Kenan Song versus Muslim Salikov. This one for me is fantastic. Two fighters that have had a lot of experience inside the UFC octagon. Muslim Salikov, 20-5, represented Russia, as you can see on his picture on Tapology. Been rare, done that. if you look at his credentials, striking, obviously that's where he wants where he wants defeat, and we've seen in the past, he's quite powerful. Obviously, that that win over Andre Fialho, the spinning back kick, um, you know, that's where he wants to fight. He wants it standing. And if you look at Keenan's Song as well, I feel like I'm not really confident on him being able to take damage, and that's where I feel like Zalikov can sort of take over. He's very powerful, but he's very, I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. It's the luck of the draw. Muslim Salikov, I believe, can touch Keenan Song and knock him out. If you look at Keenan Song, he's been knocked out. I wouldn't say quite a lot, but the majority of his losses, he's been knocked out against Israel Adesanya, Brad Riddell, and obviously, I think most recently as well, quite a few fights.
Max Griffin got him
against Max Griffin, and Max Griffin, not the hardest of hitters. Against Ian Gary as well, he got knocked out, but there's no shame in that one. If you're getting knocked out against Max Griffin in round one, I think it might be a game over against Muslim Salikov, who hits really, really hard, and I think it's going to be a knockout. And I think it's going to be round two.
Yeah, Kenan Song has a pretty poor striking defense. Even in the fights where he doesn't get knocked out, he gets hit with a lot of strikes. But I must say that Muslim Salikov being 40 years old, that's very concerning. Even more concerning, he got knocked out by Randy Brown in round one. If you've seen a Randy Brown fight, you know it's probably going to go the full 15 because he's more so of a point fighter with that clean, crisp boxing, stays at range. So for him to knock out Muslim Salikov, it shows me that the durability is kind of gone. His last win was Santiago Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio, also a guy who's on a significant decline, had tons of injuries. So that's not super impressive to me at this point. Kenan Song, I think, is actually going to win this fight by knockout. This is going to be one of those fights where you're like, oh, Muslim Salikov back in the day would have won this one, but he's just a bit on the older side now, and Kenan Song, who's only 34. I think he catches him in round two here. This is going to be a chess match. I don't think they're going to be throwing that much because Muslim is going to be threatening those counter shots a lot, but I think his speed is going to let him down here, and he's going to get knocked out in round two.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Could be a good one at £170. I think the fans are going to go wild about this point. There's going to be a lot of Chinese fighters that fought in the part, obviously in the part, in the prelims. But I think the main card, I think the atmosphere is going to ramp up a little bit more, and I feel like it's going to ramp up once they see their prospect Kong Wang come out. As she fights Gabrielle Fernandez at £125 in the women's featherweight division, in the women's flyweight division. Oscar, let's move over to you. Kong Wang, 6-0, Chinese prospect. She came into the UFC against Victoria Leonardo, put her lights out in round one, right cross. Let's talk about it. Did she make it 2-0 inside the UFC? She comes off the back of, of the. I would say it's quite successful, especially for the Asian market, to road to the UFC, and we're seeing that later as well. Does she make it 2-0 inside the UFC?
I think she does. This is the prospect that I'm most excited about in the female division right now because she's a proven knockout artist. She knocked out Victoria Leonardo in about a minute in her debut. And this wasn't one of those TKOs. This was a one and done punch. She has the power to honestly hurt most of this division. And she even has a win over Valentina Shevchenko back in the day in kickboxing. So that shows you the credentials that she has. Gabriela Fernandez has struggled with mid-level flyweights here. A lot of them do take her down, but I just believe in this fight. It's a big mismatch on the feet. Gabriela probably is going to be shooting for takedowns here and there, but I'm going to assume that Kong Wang catches her before she gets anything significant going on the ground. I'll say it's going to be overwhelming damage, and in the round three, we see a knockout from Kong Wang.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually. You talked about obviously Kong Wang beating Valentina Shevchenko, and that was Valentina Shevchenko's last fight before she entered the UFC. She was boxing, she was kickboxing and doing mixed martial arts at the same time, and she lost to Kong Wang, and then she signed with the UFC and beat Sarah Kaufman. This one, it's fantastic. You know what Kong Wang wants to do? She wants to stand and bang. She wants to knock you out. If you look at Gabriela Fernandez, a lot of submissions on her side on her record. Let's see who plays out a typical grappler versus striker matchup. Let's see who wins. I like Kong Wang in this position as well. 6-0, great prospect, a lot of hype, looked great in the debut. Let's see how she gets on in her second appearance. Main card as well. We're going to go move over to Volkan Oezdemir versus Carlos Ulberg. This one for me is fantastic. This, it's on the, it's on the main card. One of the first few fights on the main card. I like this one. Carlos Ulberg, has been looking great as of late. Once he sort of lost to Kennedy and Chukwu, he sort of turned things around, sort of been more precise with his striking, and he's been knocking out everybody and even submitting a few as well. You submitted Dong Won Chong, but yeah, knocked out Tafun and Chukwu in his last fight, knocked out Alonzo Menfield. The momentum and the progression of Carlos Ulberg is looking up right now. The trajectory is looking good. He goes in against Volkan Oezdemir, who once upon a time was at the same point as Carlos Ulberg. He was the man that everyone was looking at. Then he fought DC and fell in the hands of DC, and then eventually Anthony Smith and Dominic Reyes. So, is it going to be a similar situation where Volkan Oezdemir beats the prospect of Carlos Ulberg, who he was once there, or does Carlos Ulberg continue the momentum and progression and absolute finishing streak that he has alive right now? We know what he wants. He doesn't want to get taken down. If he gets taken down, I feel like obviously Volkan Oezdemir has that grappling advantage because he's had more experience in MMA. Carlos Ulberg kind of wants to kickbox. That's where he comes from. That's his origin. What's your thoughts on this? Does Volkan Oezdemir stop the progression of Carlos Ulberg, or do we see Volkan Oezdemir getting knocked out?
I think this is going to be a very competitive fight. Ulberg is a significant favorite, but Volkan, I feel like he got dismissed a lot after he had a couple of tough losses following his title fight with DC. He lost to Anthony Smith after that as well. But if you look at a lot of these fights that he's had, he's kind of the gatekeeper of the division. He's been beating some of these guys like Bogdan Kuskov. He had a very competitive fight with Nikita Krylov. I feel like he's still in the mix, even though he's had a lot of losses. Ulberg, on the other hand, he had a tough debut against Kennedy and Chukwu, but after that, he's just killing guys left and right, really. But he's also a guy that's not going to force a finish. As you said, he's more of a counter striker. That's what he did to Alonzo Menfield, who fought recklessly and got knocked out in 20 seconds. I think Volkan is a lot smarter than Alonzo, so I think this is going to be a more measured fight from Volkan, but I still believe that Carlos Ulberg can land the bigger shots here thanks to his slight reach advantage. He'll be staying on the outside more, maybe throwing in some leg kicks. I don't think we'll see any grappling here, but it's going to be a closely contested decision that I believe is going to be won by Carlos Ulberg.
Absolutely agree. Carlos Ulberg is looking fantastic as of late, and I do agree as well. If you look at, the only time Volkan Oezdemir, the only time inside the UFC that he's been knocked out was against Jiri Prochazka, and that was in a bit of a wild scrap, and then he eventually got knocked out. That one though was it was a fantastic fight to watch. This one as well is going to be a good one. I feel like Carlos Ulberg is going to bring the heat. I think they're both going to bring the heat. Volkan Oezdemir as well. If he comes in there, how he's been looking is late. No time. He's going to look there to throw some hands and maybe get a rear naked choke. But I've got Carlos Ulberg. I think the trajectory of the Australian goes up. I think he gets a finish this weekend against Volkan Oezdemir, what would be a great statement, a big statement in the UFC 205 division. Next one at the UFC 205 division, we got Ozzy Diaz versus Ming Yang Sang. Ming Yang came inside the UFC. I remember watching his fight on the road to the UFC. Again, I mentioned that again. I felt like it's been a highly successful, program for the UFC, where he knocked out Tuko Tokos, who was a British slasher. I think it was like Greece fighter. Knocked him out viciously, slumped him up against the cage. Came inside the UFC. Within 1 minute and 41 seconds, gets a knockout against Branson Ribeiro. We know what he wants to do. He's got very, very, very heavy hands. Does he knock out Ozzy Diaz? Who is 9-2, less more fights. But I feel like with with the Chinese fighters, they have a lot of fights. But the competition isn't really all there. Unfortunately, the Asian scene is not really that stacked. Who have we got here in this one? Zhang, since entering inside the UFC and road to the UFC, has looked good.
Yeah, for Ozzy Diaz, I feel like he's a beneficiary of the UFC's willingness to take more people as they have more events. This guy got knocked out quite easily on the Contender Series. I wasn't all that too impressed with him when he won since then. And for Zhang Yang, the power has been overwhelming. Knocked out Tuco Tokos, knocked out Brenton Hebrew. I just believe the power is too much for Ozzy Diaz. Ozzy Diaz has been knocked out before quite easily. This is going to be a brawl. It's going to be about who lands first. I think Zhang Yang is quicker, more athletic, so I have to give him the edge. I think he gets it done very early.
Yes, absolutely agree. And we've got to mention, obviously, Ozzy Diaz fought in the Contender Series at middleweight against Joe Pyfer. So, not naturally, not really a 205er. So that's interesting to see how the size and difference kind of plays a factor. Since his fights outside, the Contender Series, he has fought a 205 and he beat Chuck Campbell and Bevon Lewis. But let's talk about the size. The size differential I feel like it's going to be quite big and hard for him to overcome. Zhang is big for 205 pounds as well. He's got a really big frame, some big hands and big power. I agree. He gets knocked out, but I also got to mention if it gets past, I say the 3 or 4 minute mark, I think Ozzy Diaz improves his odds of winning. If you look at Zhang and his record, there is he's got rear naked choke by a guy who had making his pro debut. He got knocked out against that Ukrainian guy who came into the UFC and had a fake record. There is a lot of question marks with Zhang. We've just got to find them out. Can Ozzy Diaz be the one to kind of unravel the mystery of Zhang? We're going to find out this weekend. That's the most important thing of the UFC and obviously MMA. We find out and we see what happens. Next one, road to the UFC. We've got a tournament championship. Zhu Yong Yu versus Bao Gao. Some of these names are absolutely. It's hard for me to pronounce on a most of the time, every weekend. But I'm going to throw it to Oscar. He's got some tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, so it's Su Young Yu versus Bongjing Genesoli. And this is going to be, I think, a great performance from Yu, who has a major grappling advantage here. The limited tape study that I did on this shows that Boggling is so limited on the ground. He's gotten his back taken quite easily before. And So Young Yu is more so of a dominant grappler. We're going to see him take his back. And I think he chokes him out in round 2. I'll keep it short and sweet for the road to the UFC tournament championship because a lot of people are unaware of this and they're just here for the quick pick. So I'll keep it swiftly moving on. The next one is Kiru Sahota fighting out of India and England, respectively, and Dong Hoon Choi. This is a flyweight fight, so both guys are very quick. But the main takeaway here is that Kiru is 5'10" at flyweight. You don't see a lot of 5'10" flyweights. That's tall for that weight class. So Dong Hoon Choi is a lot shorter than him. It's just going to be problematic. The range is going to be overwhelming here. You said you were excited about Kiru heading into this, so what should people expect from Kiru?
People should expect from Kiru is action. A lot of volume. He's going to bring the pace. As you mentioned, they're 5'10". He's going to have a massive reach advantage of most of his opponents at flyweight. The only thing that worries me about Kiru is he's, I wouldn't say susceptible of getting knocked out. He's had one knockout loss in his career, in his professional career, and it was a bad one. It was against a guy who, he's quite stocky, likes to throw some bombs, throw some hands. And if Dong Hu Choi comes in early, looking to throw hands, I feel like it could be a problem for Sahota. But Kiru, massive, as we talked about. I feel like he can use that size to his frame. If he could stay out of boxing range and stay clear and keep it kickboxing at a decent range where he can make himself work, he'll win this fight very easily. His size and reach, it's just going to be massive for anyone in the division 125 pounds. He's very lean. He's very lanky. If he wins this weekend and gets signed to the UFC, he is a fantastic asset straight into the UFC flyweight division. It's a big ask for him against a South Korean who's 8-0, a prospect out of of Asia. It's whether the Asian man can come in there and throw some bombs early on and knock out Kira Sahota, which is it's going to be a tough ask for either of them to get it done. But if I'm going for anyone, I think it's Kiri.
Yeah, and it'll be great to see a man of Indian descent do well in the UFC because so far the success has been very limited. So also a man of that stature, I think, as you said, will go quite far in this weight class if his skill set can improve. And for the next fight at strawweight, you have Zhao Kan Feng versus Ming Shi. This fight, I think, is easy to pick because Ming Shi 2 years ago lost to a decision to a fighter that I think was 0-1. You might have to fact check me on that one if you look at Ming Shi's record. That is very concerning. She is actually a doctor outside of fighting, so that's her nickname. But for Zhao Kong Feng, the record is a lot more impressive if you look at her run. Just being a lot more higher level competition, as high as you get, I guess, in China, because we've seen before that it's just hard to get a quality resume fighting in some areas in the world. So for Zhao Kang Feng, I have to take her on the strength of her striking, and also the fact that Ming Shi just lost to an 0-1 fighter. That's just that's an instant fade, if you ask me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to, seeing how it all plays out on the prelims. I don't mind these tournament championships. I feel like, obviously, it means a lot to them. We're going to see how it finds out that, there's more than, fighting for a UFC contract. It's going to be good to see how it all plays out. Next one, another one at 125 pounds. We have a lot of small fights, small division fights on this card. Being in Asia makes perfect sense. They, over there, they quite tend to be, on the smaller size. And there's only a few ones that, huge like Zhang, massive. But yeah, let's talk about Carlos Hernandez versus Wowza. That's a good name. Carlos Hernandez, 9-4 American versus 8-0 Oscar. I'm going to quickly ask you to pronounce his name, and I'll give you my pick.
So I need the assistance of reading his first name, but his last name is Turmentabero. Okay, that was a tongue twister. I hate to try again. So we'll call him Mr. T. So Mr. T, there we go. So it's Niam Jargo Tumendembero. There we go. This is a real exercise in pronunciation. Even John Anik had to give it a couple of repeats on his podcast. So bless John Anik for the service he provides. But at the end of the day, this is going to be an easy fight for me to pick because Carlos Hernandez, they keep on feeding this guy to prospects. They fed him to Tatsuro Taira, to who else? To Nakamura, Rinya Nakamura. They don't want to see this guy win. They want him to be a stepping stone. But unfortunately, I think he's a lot better than his opponent here, Mr. T. And I think Carlos Hernandez is going to get his back. And I think he submits him. A lot of people have pointed out the deficiencies in Mr. T's grappling. And Carlos Hernandez has shown a lot of competency on the ground when he fought, who was it? The Ukrainian prospect that the UFC had, who was penned as this grappler. It goes out there and makes him look foolish. Actually,
Dennis Bondar.
Yeah, Dennis Bondar. He was able to manhandle him on the ground. That just shows the improvements that he's made. I just don't think Mr. T is anywhere near ready to beat him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I talked about the Asian, the market not being very too stacked. So the fights outside, it's very hard. Fighting, good caliber competition. If you look at his record, 1-1. This is his first fight. He fought 1-1, 2-2, 2-1, 0-0. In his fifth fight, he fought a guy who was 4-1. So, got to respectable down the end of the line. But then, he went outside the UFC. He's had two fights on the road to the UFC. He's beat Kiram, who's 9-4, beat Peter Dianzo, who was 6-2. Now, as we talked about, he faces Carlos Hernandez, who, is a big test for himself. He's had a few fights inside the UFC, a win inside the UFC against, as you talked about, Dennis Bondar and obviously Victor, Altamirano. Lost against, if you look at his losses, Tatsi Taira, two Japanese in a row, and two Japanese prospects in a row, it was, the UFC must not have liked him because they put him up with two great killers in a row. Now he fights another one who's this is his third undefeated fight in a row. Let's see how he gets on. And I do believe as well, as you mentioned now, I think Carlos Hernandez can take this guy down and get the submission victory. I like this one. Next one, we do have 125 pounder again. 7-0 versus 7-0. This one for me is quite important. Why? You look at him, Lonier Kavanagh. You think, oh, he's Chinese. Why does this matter for Lenny? He fights out of GBTT, which is Great Britain top team, under the watchful, under the important, under one of the best coaches that we have inside the UK, Brad One Punch Pickett, legend of the UK MMA sport, legend of the MMA sport. If you're from anywhere, he came in there, he did what he did, and now he's producing world class talent like Nathaniel Wood, like Lonier Kavanagh. I remember speaking to Brad Pickett, Nathaniel Wood, and they always said to me, "Just wait until you see this guy." And I was like, "What guy?" He said, "Lonier Kavanagh. Just wait until you see. Wait until you see he comes through. Just wait to see how good he is." Here he is. You saw him in the extended series. Starched his opponent, put the lights out. And that's what we've seen from him in Cage Warriors. His striking is impeccable. I would say we're not really seeing him challenged. We're not really seeing him protested because he's been putting the lights out. Can Jose Ochoa be the guy to kind of stop him? I don't know, man. I'm on that Lonier Kavanagh train early. I remember watching him in Cage Warriors, kind of rising through the ranks in Cage Warriors. He's special. He's special. And if he touches your chin once, it could be game over. He's very precise. He's very technical. I think we're going to see a knockout. I think Jose goes to sleep this weekend.
I'm going to have to agree with you. Even though Jose Ochoa, he's Peruvian, and if we learned anything watching the UFC the past 2 years, we know that Peruvians have great chins. You can compare them to Mexicans in that sense. And they also love to brawl in the pocket out there. And Jose Ochoa, he trains out of shoot to box with Diego Lima, the chin where Charles Oliveira is at, and all his blonde-headed friends. And Lonier Kavanagh, as you said, great gym. But what really makes this guy special is his athleticism and power. That combination at flyweight is deadly because a lot of these guys are not getting finishes like Kavanagh is. They're not sending their opponents to the shadow round. And he has the ability to do that. His last fight was a 6-0 guy, Ho, who was a great prospect, and he made him look like he was just just a can off the regional scene, which is not the truth. That's just how powerful Kavanagh is. He hits a perfect backflip afterwards. So the athleticism, the speed, I think is going to be too much. And Ochoa is going to fall right into the bait. I think he's going to brawl with him, and he's going to get caught right in the pocket. Kavanagh's going to swarm him with ground and pound and get that knockout, keep the winning streak going. And I think this is a guy that we're going to see in the top 15 in a couple of years.
Absolutely agree. I expect big things to Lonier Kavanagh, and I think it starts this weekend. We've seen him inside the UFC / extended series before. It's going to be a knockout this weekend under the watchful eye of Brad Pickett. This one pumps me up. I'm looking forward to it. Next one at 135 pounds, Long Chow versus Quang Lee. I think that was actually quite good, no?
Yeah, perfect. Nothing wrong.
Look at that. I could be a Chinese translator in no time. Probably not. Fabiano Brzezinski, even though he's Brazilian.
Yeah, this fight I think is fairly easy to pick, just because Quang Lee already had that UFC start when he fought Chris Gutierrez in the Apex like a year ago, and he showed that he's not a guy that you can just step over. Chris Gutierrez, if you're not that high level, there's been some instances where he gets these nasty finishes. Like Frank Yeager was a different case because he was on the older side, but he knocked him out quite easily. He gets a lot of PKOs, Kwang Lee was able to go the full 15 with him, so you have to respect him for that. And he even won round 2 of that fight with some control time on the ground. Lang Zhao, he has this really long record. He's actually still on the young side. He's not even 30 yet. So Kwang Lee has a little less miles on him, but I think that UFC experience means a lot more than a lot of Lang Zhao's fights. And Kwang Lee is going to keep this on the feet, maybe mix in some grappling, but I think he beats Lang Zhao to the punch here. What he showed with Chris Gutierrez was that he also can maintain top position if need be. So if things get hairy on the feet, you can expect him to get a takedown here. So just with we know more about Kwang Lee against actual quality competition, that matters a lot to me. So I'll be picking him by decision.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this one. A lot of great fights. There's a lot of little men in action this weekend. And what does that promise? Action, volume, a lot of strikes being thrown. If you've watched one championship, some of them guys over there are crazy. That some of the tiniest men that you've ever seen in life, and they're producing knockouts and they're starching their opponents. I think we're going to see a good one this weekend. Other than the American, the audience, if you're watching this, there's not too much to offer instead of Lonia Kavanaugh and Kira Shota, but this one for the Chinese fan, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, and they're opening the card up in style because you have Maha Shat, who is one of the most exciting Chinese fighters the UFC has. He's taking on Nicholas Mota, who is be killed out there. So I expect somebody to get knocked out in this opening fight. UFC knows what they're doing opening the card with this. And I'm picking Maha Shat to get this knockout in round 2 against Nicholas Mota. Mota got knocked out by Jim Miller. He got knocked out by many other guys since then. He's just a guy that he does have power, but he's more so of a guy that is banking on winning a decision by landing the bigger shots, not by throwing a lot. I just think it's problematic when you're fighting Maha Shat, who he has got a great win on his record. It's Steve Garcia. He got it like 2 years ago. It was in Asia as well, I believe. So that win has aged so well because Steve Garcia is on the longest knockout streak in the whole UFC right now. He's on a 6-fight knockout streak. He just knocked out Cal Nelson a couple months ago. So Maha Shat is just way too dangerous for Nicholas Mota, who's showed a lot of vulnerabilities before.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Nicholas Mota, as you mentioned there, getting knocked out by Jim Miller. Jim Miller, primarily, a grappler. So I can't even remember the last time maybe Jim Miller even got, a knockout. Besides that, obviously he beat Jesse Butler. That was by knockout. So other than that, I mean, Eric, he's got a few knockouts actually. To be fair to him, but yeah, not great getting knocked out by Jim Miller. But Nicholas Mota versus Mahasheti this weekend to open up the card should be good. The Chinese fans are in action. They're going to be promised violence. I do believe. I'm looking forward to this one. It's going to be great. And obviously that main card, the main fight as well. Petr Yan versus Davison Figueiredo. Touch wood. Don't want to say anything, but on paper, should produce, should entertain the fans. Watching at home, watching at the stands. Like I said, I don't want to jinx anything, but that one should be fantastic. Looking forward to see how that one plays out. That's UFC Fight Night Macau. Some really good fights on the card. Some ones that if you're not Chinese fans, quite hard to kind of gasp who's going to win. We talked about did we talk about Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul?
We did not know, but this was tragic.
Sad. Yeah. That's
honestly,
the only way.
I don't want to go too deep into this, but Mike Tyson on his way there, he tripped on his way there. You could see that this is a guy who should be nowhere near combat sports, and Jake Paul carried him. This is what this was. People like to say rigged. Yeah, I'm gonna say this was kind of rigged because Jake Paul could have killed him quite early, but he decided not to. He decided to just make it a decision out of pity for Mike Tyson. This was tough to watch, quite literally, because Netflix was overwhelmed with the volume of viewership. I believe they had, what was it, like 60 million viewers at once. So they were overwhelmed. It was hard to watch, literally and figuratively.
Which is a great achievement. Don't get me wrong, but Mike Tyson had no rightfulness to be inside that boxing ring. And the worst bit about it was that a pro-sanctioned bout, Oscar. It was a pro-sanctioned bout.
Yeah.
And now, if you look at this, there's actually Jake Paul on the record of Mike Tyson, and he's got a win over him against Mike Tyson, who was one of the most decorated heavyweight boxers in the world. You know how good he was. He's ferocious, knocked out loads of people, and back in his day. Arguably one of the just one of the most scariest heavyweights in the world, has got a loss to Jake Paul, a guy who was not long ago on Disney.
Yeah, this was a clear money grab on both sides. I'm not sure Jake Paul is even confident that people know how big of a fraudulent win this is. Beating a guy this past his prime, he was past his prime 25 years ago, so or even 30 years ago. So this win basically means nothing, honestly. Like, nobody sees this as a real win if they know anything about combat sports.
Absolutely agree. This one was sad to watch. We've got a few more fights this weekend. I just want to touch up on just Cage Warriors.
Sure.
181 that's going down in Newcastle, England. I'll be there in attendance to watch this. If you're a UK fan or a British fan, you know what your Cage Warriors. And we've got a stacked card this weekend in Newcastle. Kennedy Freeman, the daughter of Ian Freeman, getting her title shot at £135 should be fantastic. Harry Hardwick on the card in the main event. It's going to be Shad Hack, flyweight, fighting out of South Shield. So just 10 minutes around the corner from Newcastle. Justin Burlinson fighting out of Seaham, near Sunderland. This one for the Newcastle and the North East fans is going to be fantastic. Charles joining us is Yannick Bahati. That is one of the fight of the nights, and that's my main event of the night. I can't wait to watch that one. And the first fight of the weekend, we got Michael Techamu against Demar Silva. Stay tuned to the channel because that interview is going to be out in about a few hours. So make sure you watch that one and see what he thinks of the matchup and etc. But yeah, if you're a UK fan, make sure you're watching this one. It's going to be fantastic.
For me, Justin Burlinson is a guy to keep a watch on because this guy already had his shot at Contender Series. He got knocked out by none other than Slavakos, and that was a fight where he got a little reckless there, but he still showed promise. The UFC already has their eye on him, so a win here could result potentially in a call from the UFC or a call for Contender Series later next year. And for the women's bantamweight title, that's a fight where the winner probably gets into the UFC because I don't know if people have noticed that bantamweight division is paper thin. Basically, like 2 wins gets you a ranking in that division, so they're desperate for talent. And Cage Warriors has proven in delivering quality talent.
Absolutely agree. I'm looking forward to this one. As you talked about Justin Burlinson, just a note on him as well. Recently overcoming testicular, I don't know if I said a word, but testicular cancer. I'm very bad at pronouncing it. So he's overcoming cancer. And this is his first fight since, fighting that battle. He was scheduled to fight on the 10 series against Danny Barlow. Didn't happen, unfortunately, but now he's back inside the cage, and it's just a good feel moment. It's just good to see him back inside the cage, doing his job and doing what he loves best. I see him in the gym a lot. He's always, he's massive. He's huge. For 170 pounds, he's a big boy. I expect to see him get the job done this weekend. As you talked about there, and get his second shot potentially on the Cage Warriors. I know the UFC are coming back to London in March.
Correct.
There's a few things that I'd love to see get on there, and maybe he could be one of them with a big win.
Yeah, they're coming for a fight night, and I'm pretty certain that it's going to be Leon Edwards as the headliner.
I would love that to be because I will be there in attendance. I know tickets ain't out yet. I haven't got any yet, but I am banking on it because the hotel's booked. So we've kind of got to get tickets.
March 22nd. So be on the lookout for that. I know they're going to do a great job stacking that with the English talent. They always do. They do a great job developing the talent over there. So there's a lot
They
to
always
look forward to.
matchups. They love it.
Yeah. As for the UFC, we don't have that many events left. We only have 3. We have UFC Macau, we have UFC 310, and we have UFC Tampa. I say we talk about the recent announcements made for UFC 310. The main event is now Pantoja versus Asakura, but the co-main event is a new one at welterweight. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary, 2 undefeated prospects at welterweight. This is what MMA is all about. 2 guys at the peak of their powers going at it in hopes of getting that title.
Yeah, Alexander Pantoja versus Kyle Skoro. Quite an interesting, story because you don't really see a fighter come inside the UFC and get an immediate title shot like this. I feel like the UFC are putting a lot of eggs in a basket here with Kyle Skoro. They are believing in him a lot. I don't know what they've seen from him because I can't lie. I think this is a good fight for Pantoja. I think he can announce his will and go over and beat Kaiser. I think this is a good fight for the champion. I've seen Kaiser get knocked out by Manel Cap. Ryzen. I think he got beat by Horiguchi. I don't know. I think this is a fantastic fight from Pantoja. If this fight gets to the floor, all Pantoja's got to avoid is the striking. I know it's easy said than done. Kaiser is a big flyweight. I think I don't think he's ever fought at flyweight in Japan. Their flyweight is 135 pounds. So
yeah,
will he make weight?
He's fought before. He's done it before, but he has not done it in a long time. So we could actually see a tough weight cut from Kaya Sakura here. Pantoja makes this weight quite comfortably. He's fought 5 rounds without issue. So this is going to be a really interesting fight because there's going to be a lot of questions that we have going into it. And for Kaya Sakura, if he wins this fight, this is just a huge win for Asian MMA, the first Japanese UFC champion. That'd be a big deal. But that co-main event, if in my honest opinion, I'm looking forward to it a lot more, just because these guys have a lot more name value, and they've proven to be exciting. Shavkat Rakhmonov being just the chief of exciting at welterweight. No decisions wins whatsoever. Always puts himself in danger to get that finish. You have to respect it. And for Ian Machado Gary, keeps on silencing those doubters left and right with these wins. You may not like how he gets it done, but he gets the job done. That's just what he does. And these guys have a lot of rumors surrounding their sparring. There's some footage out there. You never know what happened in those sessions, but something tells me that Shavkat is not going to be losing this fight.
Yeah, and I feel like I've got another prediction. Someone's going to sleep in that fight as well. I think that's probably one of the easiest predictions that we could make. Shavkat Rakhmonov, as you mentioned, undefeated, 18-0, loads of knockouts. Ian Machado Gary, 15-0, coming off a win against MVP, which was a lot of people thought maybe MVP could have got the nod that night. You had to use his experience and use his grappling, because ultimately MVP was just too quick for him that night. I feel like if that fight stayed in the feet, I think MVP wins that fight kind of handle easily.
Yeah, he kept on saying all fight week, I'm a better striker than MVP. And when the rubber hit the road, it was not what he said it was. He decided to grapple like he was Damian Maya out
there. Completely agree. And that pretty much wraps up the end of the episode. We talked about a lot. We talked about Jan Figueiredo, UFC 309. What's going to happen? Is it Tom Aspinall, Jones Bones? If Jones comes back, it has to be Tom Aspinall. It has to be Tommy Aspinall. I think the UFC will look to sort it, but I feel like the talks with Jon Jones and the UFC are not going to go how they're supposed to. And it wouldn't really surprise me if this fight behind me never happens. So if you're a Tommy Aspinall fan, I would expect him not to fight Jon Jones next. I think it's going to be. I think he'll be promoted because obviously Jon Jones and UFC talks will go wrong, and I think the belt will get vacated. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we'll see Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones?
Right now, I just don't think so. I think John is going to price himself out. He's going to ask for an unrealistic amount of money, and he's going to place the blame on the UFC and not on himself. And also, Dana White conceded that if Alex Pineda and John Jones bug him enough about booking the fight, that he might do it. I believe those two guys will refuse everyone else and say they're only going to fight each other, and that'll prompt Dana to book the fight reluctantly. But I think he'll do it also because it's a huge money fight.
The only way I see this fight happening is our Lord and Savior, Turkey Alex Sheesh, gets involved. He's the only
Wow,
one
that
with
would be
to help.
well, if he wants to, he can make things even juicier and do John versus Francis, the fight we never
Yeah.
got. Now that would
Yes.
be that would really be interesting. Man,
Yeah,
and
like
yeah, there's a lot of new things that'll be on surface next year. They're gonna have a lot of new boxing promotion. The UFC and I believe Turkey are working on something. You're gonna have the $25 million bare knuckle boxing tournament, which is open to everybody. I think that's gonna attract some huge names. Huge names.
25. How have the BKSC got that much money?
Conor McGregor, maybe. Maybe they got some
How
investors to say they're investing
he's
in
in court.
Conor. You never
That's
know.
crazy.
You never know what's going on behind closed doors with the BKFC. But uh, a $25 million prize tournament that could bring some guys just to leave the UFC altogether, because that's the kind of payday you only see in boxing.
Yeah, that is a good payday. I'm interested to see how how it all pays. Is it a division? Or is it just open?
I believe with a prize of that caliber, it would have to be open. It would just be, man. You would have to assume a heavyweight wins that, but who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe they will have restrictions. I don't know. It's going to be tough to figure out, but they seem very dead set on doing it.
yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. Make sure you keep an eye on that. But that's a very good bye from me and Oscar. We'll catch you in the next one. A lot to talk. We talked about a lot this, in this episode, and we'll talk about a lot next weekend as we, recap Jan Figueiredo, and as you mentioned, 310 on the horizon.
Yeah, and we're going to have a week off actually next week, so it's a
Yeah,
little bit of a breather with the chaos going on. And yeah, UFC Tampa, Buckley versus Covington. Now that's an appetizing main event right there.
absolutely agree. A very good bye from me and Oscar. We'll catch you all next week where we talk about what happened in China